Alright, this is SSLFamilyDad with Simple Suburban Living, and today we're going to be turning some of these tomatoes into some awesome restaurant style salsa. Okay, so let's get started making some very easy to make and easy to can salsa. This recipe I found to be very quick and easy to do, especially with fresh tomatoes out of the garden, and it's also very easy to can. I'm using very limited equipment here. I don't have a lot of canning equipment or anything like that. The biggest thing that you'll need or want is a good food processor or blender for this. You can do without that for sure, but your salsa will just be a lot more chunky than this one will. So the recipe, I'll put a link to the original recipe that I kind of derived this from. I'll put a link to that in the description, and then I'll put all the ingredients and all that good stuff in the description as well for the recipe derivative that I'm using here. So some of the things that you'll need, starting with so there's some coarse salt, some ground cumin, ground black pepper. I just use the little grinder here with black pepper corns. Red pepper if you want to add just a little bit of spice to it. You can use lime juice or lemon juice. Some fresh green peppers. These ones I actually purchased, but we already used all the ones out of our aquaponic system and garden, so I had to go out and buy some more. Tomatoes. Now you can use any kind of tomato. The Roma tomatoes are a little more meaty, and so your salsa won't be quite as runny, or you won't have to cook it down as much if you want it to be less runny. These are like a hybrid tomato, and then I've got some beef steaks also. I'm just kind of mixing them all together, and I'll show you how we're processing these tomatoes. This is obviously the main ingredient here, and so what I like to do is just do a few batches of this as the tomatoes ripen up in our garden. And you're also going to need an onion, or several onions, depending on how much you're making here. So you'll need lots of onions. I believe it's a cup. I'll go through the actual amounts here in a minute. The other thing that you're going to need is some fresh cilantro. Again, I had to purchase this. Unfortunately, I used all the cilantro out of our garden, and it's getting a little bit late in the season, and so the rest of it has died off. But this is just some fresh cilantro from the store. Get it organic, farmer's market, whatever you want to do. But you'll need about a quarter cup of this or a half cup of this, depending on how you want to do the recipe for each batch. Okay, so the first thing is to start with the tomatoes. This is going to be the main ingredient, and so we want to have the most of this, obviously, in the recipe. So no matter what type of tomatoes you're using, it doesn't really matter. You're going to follow the same process. Basically, take out your stems. You want to go ahead and take out the cores. Obviously, wash the tomatoes before you get to this step. And I like this recipe the way that I'm doing it here, especially if you have a good food processor, because you do not need to blanch the tomatoes, and you don't really need to take the skins off. So just wash the tomatoes real good, and that should be sufficient. What I like to do is just cut the tomatoes into quarters, and I always have a kind of a bowl handy here. And you can see these seed pockets. All I do is just kind of scoop those out. Same thing with the Roma tomatoes. I just cut the top right off. As I said, the Roma tomatoes are a lot more meaty, and they're a lot easier to clean out. So you get a nice piece of tomato there that way. Okay, so after we've got our tomatoes all chopped up, 3 cups of tomatoes per batch here. I'm doing 3 batches today just because I have a lot of tomatoes. I wouldn't be able to do 4, but so the next thing is to get a half a cup of green peppers, and you can. Again, the food processor is going to do most of the work here, so we don't need to worry about chopping them up too small. All right, next up is onion, and we need one full cup of onion. Again, I'm going to chop this up fairly small here, but I'm going to let the food processor do the most of the work. Works out to about 1 full onion. Alright, so next up is cilantro. I like to get rid of most of the stem and use as much of the leaf as possible. And so we need about a quarter cup of fresh cilantro. Alright, we're going to add 2 tablespoons of lime juice. Now, my first time I did this, I used lemon juice, and that works just fine. Alright, half teaspoon of ground cumin. Half teaspoon of coarse or kosher salt. And a half teaspoon of ground black pepper. And just just estimating here with this, obviously. And I also add some red pepper flakes. Now this is where you got to be real careful. These can make it hot real quick. You can also add chopped up jalapeno peppers and other types of peppers if you'd like to. That's totally fine. Okay, so I'm making multiple batches here, so while I'm getting each batch ready, I've got a pot on the stove that I've just got on medium heat, and this is just to kind of warm the salsa up, and you can also cook it down here, you know, get a little bit of the water out if you made it too runny. But here I'm just kind of getting it warmed up and keeping it warm while I'm making the rest of the batches here. So, and this is the kind of the finished product. I like it a little bit runnier. You could definitely boil it down if you want it to be thinner, but this is just, it smells so awesome. You can smell that cilantro in there, and you can eat this fresh, of course. You don't have to can it. If you just want to make a small batch and just eat it fresh, it's awesome. You can make it chunkier, you can make it thinner, you can do whatever you want with it. So, but this we're going to can because I've got quite a bit fresh already. Alright, so we're ready to start canning here. I don't want to make this into too much of a canning how-to, but the basics are start with a clean jar, obviously. I've got our funnel on here ready to go. We've got our hot salsa we're going to be adding to the jars, and we're just going to go ahead and get these filled up. Once the jars are just about to the top, we're going to measure our headspace. I'll show you how to do that using that little tool. I'll have a link to this in the description to those the little tools we use and stuff like that here, so in case you're interested in checking them out, they're pretty cheap. Alright, so for salsa we're supposed to be doing a 1/2 inch of headspace, which I think is this mark right here, and so we can stick that on the edge of the jar and kind of measure around there, and that is pretty darn close. So I think that'll be perfect 1/2 inch headspace. It's important to keep that headspace you know, as close to what they recommend for whatever you're canning, and you can look up all that stuff online, but there has to be a certain amount of air in there in order for the can to seal properly, and if you have too much air, then obviously, you know, your food can rot and make you sick. So you want to follow those instructions as close as possible. And it's also a good idea to just take this little tool and kind of wiggle it around the edges here. I guess air bubbles can get caught along the edges of your can or your jar, and that can cause issues as well. So wiggle it around a little bit. Alright, now we're going to use our little magnet tool here to grab one of our lids out of the hot water. And before you set that lid on there, you want to make sure that you just wipe the rim of this off, get it nice and clean. And then we want to put one of our rings on, and these are just fingertip tight. It's got to be loose enough in order to let air out when it's in the water bath, so you don't want to tighten that down too much. Alright, so we're ready to add our jars to the water bath, and this is another tool that comes in that kit that just helps you grab the jars. Obviously you can use whatever you have, but this thing works very well. So all you need to do is just place these jars in here, and again, a regular water bath canner will have a rack at the bottom that keeps the jars off the bottom of the pan, and that does, obviously you don't want them bouncing around down there because they can crack. And so it's a good idea if you have a, you know, if you want to go out and get a regular water bath canner, that's fine. I'm just using whatever I have here, and this will work with no issues. So you just don't want to turn the heat up too high and start the cans bouncing around in there, because then obviously you could have a crack. So alright, once your 20-25 minutes is up, you can go ahead and pull these out, and you want to set them on the counter and let them just cool down very slowly. You know, you can let them sit overnight. Just let them cool down to room temperature very slowly, and those lids will seal on there very nicely, and you shouldn't be able to pop the lid anymore. It should be sealed down tight, and that's how you know your canning was successful. That's it. Fresh homemade salsa canned. It should last for about a year at room temperature. You'll notice a little bit of water space here at the bottom. That's normal, and you just shake it up when you're ready to use it, and it'll be just fine. Alright, well that's pretty much it for making homemade fresh salsa. I like this recipe a lot. You can do it several different ways. You can obviously, you know, chop everything up just on a cutting board and keep it real thick and chunky and serve it fresh that way, or can it that way as well. Or you can use a food processor like I did and get it real thin, kind of a restaurant style runnier salsa. I kind of like it this way a little better. It seems to blend the flavors together a little bit differently, and it tastes a little bit different. So that's just how I like to do it. But it's nice to have everything fresh out of the garden and be able to just make your own salsas and spaghetti sauces and all kinds of other things, especially with tomatoes, and be able to can that stuff for long term. So this stuff should last in the pantry for 6 months to a year, I would say. In the refrigerator, it'll last about 3 weeks, probably, or a month. And so it won't last that long in our fridge. We'll eat it, I'm sure, quicker than that. But definitely an awesome recipe and one of my favorites. I'd like to hear what you guys think, and I'd like to hear some of your recipes. So if you guys are big salsa makers, I know there's a whole bunch of different ways to do this and different recipes out there. I'd love to hear your thoughts and share your recipes and things like that. If you have a link to it, or just put the ingredients down in the description or in the comments. I'd love to hear that. I'd love to hear what you think about this one, and as always, hit thumbs up on the video, guys. It really does make a huge difference for me. And subscribe to the channel if you'd like to kind of follow along. We've got a whole variety of different things we do on our channel here. This is just one of them, just kind of, utilizing the things that we have and we grow in our homestead to make different condiments and meals and snacks and other things. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. But as always, guys, thanks for watching. Have a good one.